Hare Krishna. In this video I'm going to be talking about principle number 8. Principle 8 is to help our discussion partner to develop their understanding by using empathic hearing skills. So use empathic hearing skills to help our discussion partner develop their understanding. Before I speak about principle 8, let's do a very quick recap of the first 7 principles. You'll find evidences for them. If you actually watch the videos about these principles, you can find the videos in the group Introduction and Principles. So the first principle was hear from a liberated pure devotee of Krishna. The second is to discuss Srila Prabhupada's purports with other devotees. The third is to discuss Srila Prabhupada's purports regularly. The fourth is to discuss them systematically. The fifth is to repeat in our own words what we understand Srila Prabhupada's intended meaning is. So repeat what we think his intended meaning is, repeat it in our own words. The sixth is to scrutinize his purports, word for word and from different perspectives. The seventh is don't engage in argumentative debate. So if you want to see evidences for these first 7 principles, please go to the group Introduction and Principles, and you'll see videos for them where I cite the evidences. So principle 8, to help our discussion partner develop their understanding by us using empathic hearing skills. So we use empathic hearing skills to help our discussion partner. Now, I remember when we first started discussing, my husband and myself, back in the 1990s, there was a lot of subtle rivalry between us. And you may have also experienced this if you've ever tried discussing with your spouse or with another devotee, that in so many very subtle ways we can undermine each other. Like one of us would understand something and then the other would say, that's not a very important point. That's not the main point. That's just a minor point. And so we'd very subtly and snidely dismiss the other person's understanding. Or we should just ignore what the other person said. That one person would speak, and then when it came to the other person's turn to speak, they didn't comment on the other person's points at all. They just ignored it and just made their own points. So it was a quite unpleasant experience. We just constantly kept undermining each other and dismissing each other and making each other feel alienated from one another. So one day we were listening to Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we heard this pastime between Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami. And this pastime is the specific verses we heard were 2 that really struck us. One was Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 24, text 9. Lord Chaitanya said to Sanatana Goswami, generally, by myself, I cannot give an explanation, but by the strength of your association, something may manifest. So he's saying, I can't understand these, I can't explain these verses myself, but something that you're doing, the way you give me your association, you may help me understand something. And then later on in Madhya Lila, chapter 24, text 312, Lord Chaitanya said again to Sanatana Goswami, now, due to your association, another meaning has awakened. It is due to your devotional service that these waves of meaning are rising. So Lord Chaitanya was getting more and more lights, more and more understandings, and he's crediting his ability to come up with more and more insights to Sanatana Goswami. He's saying, it's the strength of your devotional service. You're doing something that's enabling me to understand more and more. So we were both quite puzzled. What was Lord Chaitanya, what was Sanatana Goswami doing that was, helping Lord Chaitanya to understand more and more? Because in our interactions, we used to just stifle each other. We used to just in the end close each other down. So we were wondering what on earth was Sanatana Goswami doing that he was having the opposite effect on Lord Chaitanya. Now, around the same time as we were listening to these lectures and trying to develop our home discussions, we were also reading two books. One is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and another was a parenting book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And the authors are Elaine Maslisch and Adele Faber. So in both these books, the importance of empathic listening was being constantly emphasized in both the 7 Habits book and in the How to Talk So Kids Will Listen book. In both of them, the authors were stressing the value and importance of empathic listening skills. In fact, Stephen Covey writes, he says, "The one who listens does the most work, not the one who speaks." Now that statement, when we read it, really for us echoed Lord Chaitanya's point to Sanatana Goswami. Lord Chaitanya's point to Sanatana Goswami is that it's your hearing that's bringing everything out of me. You're the one who's really making this happen by your hearing. And here, Stephen Covey was saying exactly the same thing, that it's the person who's listening who's doing the most work. And so we began trying to implement this empathic listening, and we discovered that it really began helping us, that instead of alienating each other, instead of ignoring each other, when we took the time to understand each other, it made a huge difference. But we also realized that it's not just the words we say, but it's the attitude with which we said. So if we reflected back to our discussion partners something they said, but our attitude was like, "Oh, I'm so bored doing this," it had no effect. But if our attitude was very respectful, very eager, then actually it really did have the same effect on our discussion partner as Lord Chaitanya says to Sanatana Goswami that Sanatana Goswami's association was having on him. In the sense that if we empathically reflected back in a respectful and interested manner to our discussion partner what we had understood them to say, it began helping our discussion partner understand things more and more, and brought more and more things to their consciousness, to their intelligence. So this is another comment by Stephen Covey, which we found very insightful. So he writes in his book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he says, "Empathic listening skills in part give others psychological air, open space in which a person may explore feelings, vent emotions, and feel understood without being judged. These skills include capturing feelings from nonverbal cues, listening attentively, and phrasing empathic responses clearly, supportively, and sincerely. But while all these skills are important, attitude is even more important for allowing others psychological air. To work effectively, skills must be built on a caring attitude and sincere desire to understand." I'll put these quotes with the video so you'll be able to see them for yourself. But here Stephen Covey seemed to be capturing what was the experience between Lord Chaitanya and Sanatana Goswami. That Sanatana Goswami's dealings with Lord Chaitanya was really giving Lord Chaitanya psychological air, and he was able to understand things more and more and bring up newer and newer lights, and he was crediting that to something Sanatana Goswami was doing. And through the books we were reading, we felt Krishna was giving us some insight how we could do that for each other by giving each other psychological air through empathic listening done with a sincere and respectful attitude. So there are some obstacles to empathically hearing each other, and one of the obstacles we've discovered existed both in our own relationship, and over the years we see it in other devotees, when the obstacles that prevent them from doing this empathic listening with a real sincere attitude. One of them is that the culture of superior and junior. So people who deem themselves superior, maybe they're the husband, maybe they're the parent, maybe they're the senior devotee who's been around longer. We can often have this attitude of, I shouldn't be hearing from you. There's nothing you can tell me. I know more than you, so you should just be listening to me. So if we harbor that attitude, it can be really, really difficult to develop the right mood in reflecting back what our wife says, or our child says, or the junior devotee says. This can be this culture of superiority and inferiority, subordinate and superior, can sometimes create mental blocks to correct empathic listening. So in order to try to overcome these blocks, we discovered certain things. Over the years, we discovered certain things which I'd like to share with you. And that is that intelligence is always coming from Krishna. Krishna says that I am the intelligence in man. Krishna said, I'm the ability in man. I'm the intelligence of the intelligent. So he tells us that in the Bhagavad Gita. And we realize that, intelligence or insights is not coming from us. It's coming from Krishna. And Krishna can give intelligence to anyone. And he'll often give it to us. He'll often speak to us through a so-called subordinate, our wife or our child or the junior devotee, just in order to reduce our pride and make us more susceptible to hearing him in whatever form he decides to speak to us. So we realize that sometimes it's to our benefit to be able to listen empathically. Not only are we helping out our discussion partner by giving them psychological air, but sometimes Krishna may be speaking through our discussion partner, speaking something that we really needed to hear. And he chose to give the intelligence to them to speak to us rather than to give the intelligence directly to us. So not only is it useful for the discussion partner by giving them psychological air, but it's also useful for ourselves if we can, in the context of a Shastra discussion, put aside this concept of superior and subordinate and realize that Krishna can speak through anyone. And if we listen attentively and empathically and sincerely, we may hear something that truly, truly helps us. And that was often the case for us. So in order to support this point, here is something that Lord Chaitanya says to Sanatana Goswami in Madhya Lila, chapter 21, text 145. Lord Chaitanya says, Lord Krishna is very merciful to you, because by bewildering my mind, he has exposed his personal opulence and sweetness. He has caused you to hear all these things from me for your understanding. So Lord Chaitanya is saying, Krishna got me to speak, but actually he wasn't trying to show his mercy to me. He was showing his mercy to you, because he wanted you to hear these things. So he bewildered my mind. I hadn't thought about these things before. He put these things in my mind so that I could speak them for your benefit. And we have discovered this to be true on so many occasions. So now in our family discussions, whether we're having it with husband and wife, or whether we're discussing with our children or younger devotees come, we're very keen to empathically listen, even our so-called quote-unquote subordinates, because we don't know who Krishna will speak to us through. Some objections I've heard over the years, other than the fact that she's my subordinate or he's my subordinate, and I hope we have put that to rest a little bit, but some other objections we've heard over the years to this principle of assisting our discussion partner by using empathic listening skills is that it's not there in Shastra. Sometimes devotees have said that to me. Well, in Shastra, the disciple just listens passively. He doesn't keep repeating things back. So, but that's not true. There's many instances in Shastra where we hear the subordinate reflecting back what he's heard. In fact, the first person to point out an evidence from Shastra to me was His Holiness Sri Ram Swami. He told me he was reading in the Sri Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Part 2, Chapter 2, Text 134. This is when Lord Vishnu is instructing Lord Brahma, and this is the verse. Let me read the verse for you. So this is Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Part 2, Chapter 2, Text 134. So the verse goes like this. Hearing these matters, four-headed Brahma, overwhelmed by a vast treasure of transcendental joy, quietly repeated and agreed with each point he was taught, and then offered his respects again and again at the feet of the Lord. Commentary. To show understanding of the Lord's words, Brahma dutifully repeated each point and confirmed that he agreed completely before the Lord continued with the next. So this is exactly what we do in our discussions. One of us says one thing, the other will reflect it back and confirm we've understood correctly before we give our own understanding. So subsequently, I've heard, after hearing this evidence, I went on to hear quite a few other evidences. There are two examples in the Jivadharma of the person who's listening reflecting back what he's heard to the person who's speaking. So in the Brihat Mridanga press version of the Jivadharma on page 105, we have one devotee called Chandidas. Chandidas replied, I was able to assimilate the following from the wonderful spiritual teachings given by the most respectable Anantadas Babaji. And then Chandidas proceeds to repeat in his own words everything that he had heard Anantadas Babaji instruct him. So this is an instance of empathic hearing. There's another example from Jivadharma on the Brihat Mridanga press publication, the version of Jivadharma, page 59. We have a devotee called Lahiri. He says, I hope you have been enlightened about the difference between Nitya Upasana, eternal deity worship, and Naimittika Upasana, temporary ritualistic deity worship. Devadas, another devotee who was listening, said, yes, if one worships the Srimurti but does not accept this form as eternal, such worship is material and not spiritual. So he is repeating in his own words what he had heard about Nitya Upasana and Naimittika Upasana. Lahiri says, have you understood it? And he says, yes, I've understood it. And then he puts in his own words what he understood. So that's an instance of empathic listening in scripture. And then, of course, in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, I'm sure there's many instances, but here is one instance that really struck me. This is Canto 6, Chapter 1. In the first 5 verses of Chapter 1, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, 1, Parikshit Maharaj summarizes everything he's understood Shukadeva Goswami to say so far. So these are the verses. Maharaj Parikshit said, O my Lord, O Shukadeva Goswami, you have already described in the 2nd canto the path of liberation, Nivritti Marg. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. Thus one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases. Text 2. O great sage Shukadeva Goswami, unless the living entity is freed from the infection of the material modes of nature, he receives different types of bodies in which to enjoy or suffer, and according to the body he is understood to have various inclinations. By following these inclinations, he traverses the path called Pravritti Marg, by which one may be elevated to the heavenly planets, as you have already described in the 3rd canto. Text 3. You have also described, at the end of the 5th canto, the varieties of hellish life that result from impious activities, and you have described in the 4th canto the first Manvantar, which was presided over by Swayambhuva Manu, the son of Lord Brahma. Text 4 and 5. My dear Lord, you have described the dynasties and characteristics of King Priyavrata and King Uttanapad. The Supreme Personality of Godhead created this material world with various universes, planetary systems, planets and stars, with varied lands, seas, oceans, mountains, rivers, gardens and trees, all with different characteristics. These are divided among this planet Earth, the luminaries in the sky, and the lower planetary systems. You have very clearly described these planets and the living entities who live on them. So there we have, in 5 verses at the beginning of Canto 6, Parikshit Maharaj is repeating in his own words everything that he has learned from Shukadev Goswami up to that point. There is an example of empathic listening skills, to put in our own words what we hear the other person say. If we do that, we give them psychological air. We also open up the possibility that Krishna may speak for our benefit. And there is a 3rd benefit to doing this, even if you're the superior. By you modeling good empathic listening skills, you teach your subordinate how to also listen empathically. And if you model poor empathic listening skills, you will teach them by your behavior how to listen poorly. So if you model it, your subordinate, your wife, your child, the junior devotee will also learn how to hear you respectfully and attentively and repeat back what you say. So I hope you found this helpful. This is Principle 8. Repeat back in your own words what your discussion partner says, their understanding, and in this way help them to develop their understanding. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.